These companies, in addition to making deep cuts in their own emissions, another win-win. And this is, as we know it in the Nordic region, public-private collaboration at its best. With our partners, Norway is making high-resolution satellite imagery available to everyone, anywhere and for free. This improves policy-making and helps to hold companies accountable. And it empowers indigenous peoples and local communities. It strengthens the position of environmental defenders who risk their lives for the sake of forests. I am encouraged by the new commitments from commodity traders to eliminate deforestation from their supply chains. So many of the dots are now being connected, Madam President. I'm glad to see that financial markets are incorporating forest-related financial risks in their investment decisions. This is, in fact, an acknowledgement that climate risk is a financial risk and must be managed as such. We need data and transparency if markets are to reduce pressure on tropical forests. To protect forests, we must empower the people who live in them. This is a matter of social justice. The evidence shows that strengthening the rights of indigenous peoples reduces deforestation, and only a fraction of indigenous communities have secure tenure rights. This has to change with the other changes we are encouraging. I commend, let me do that at this occasion, the leadership shown by Costa Rica and other countries. I have listened with interest to the vision presented by indigenous leaders here today, on stage and backstage, and Norway is fully committed to supporting their efforts. I am honoured to announce a collective pledge of $1.7 billion to strengthen the rights of indigenous peoples. The donor group behind this pledge is seeking to reinforce your role as guardians of forests and nature. We will support national land and forest tenure reform processes, and we will support indigenous governance structures and sustainable livelihoods. This is, in fact, a matter of economics, a matter of politics, but deep down it is a matter of ethics. And it is a matter of living up to the objective of this conference, keeping the 1.5 degrees vision alive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, and for opening this session up so well. Again, Norway's commitment not only to forests, but also to the people that depend on our forests and protect our forests. Ahead of the next session, which will be speaking about the role of Indigenous people and communities, we would like to celebrate the role of these people and the role that they play in the world's forests. In this special video, which is titled Voices from the Forest. Another inspirational video. Now we're going to sit down and have a discussion, which I hope you will find just as fascinating as all the other conversations and commitments that we've seen today. We all know the important role of Indigenous people as guardians of the world's forests, and we know that this is more vital than ever. So I would like to ask Tuntiak Katan, Vice Coordinator of Indigenous Organizations of the Amazon River Basin and General Coordinator of the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities, as our first speaker today. Patrick Hemedi, National Coordinator Dynamique des Groupes des Peuples Autochtones. President of Costa Rica, Carlos Alvarado. Darren Walker, President of the Ford Foundation. And Joan Carling, Global Director of Indigenous Peoples' Rights International. Tuntiak, could I ask you to inspire us, and you may use the lectern, if you would like, which is to your left. Use the lectern, or you can stay where you are, what you prefer.
Mi nombre es Tuntiak Katan, soy hijo del pueblo Shuar de la Amazonía ecuatoriana. Soy vicecoordinador de la COICA y coordinador general de la Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales, constituido por AMAN, REPALEC, AMPB, APIP y COICA. Todos juntos, esta Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales, tenemos 950 millones de hectáreas de bosques tropicales en el mundo. Ahora vengo a ser la voz de los niños, jóvenes, mujeres, ancianos que están en el territorio, en diferentes partes de los bosques tropicales. A decirles que la ciencia ya está reconociendo que los pueblos indígenas somos los mejores protectores de la selva, de la biodiversidad. Que la ciencia está diciendo que los ecosistemas del mundo están a punto de no retorno. Venimos aquí a decir a Glasgow, a decir a los líderes mundiales de todo el planeta, a los gobernantes. Los pueblos indígenas venimos acá para hacer un pacto de vida, porque ya no hay tiempo. A decirles que no hagan promesas políticas que no van a cumplir, para decirles que no hagan anuncios financieros, climáticos, si no van a trabajar con la gente, con los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Por lo tanto, les pedimos 5 cosas a los líderes mundiales. Intensificar el derecho de los territorios de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Queremos garantía de vida en nuestros territorios. Queremos el respeto de los líderes, de los voceros indígenas, de los protectores. No nos asesinen, no nos maten. Si los proyectos se van a realizar en el territorio, se hagan mediante consulta y consentimiento, que es lo fundamental. Y les decimos, necesitamos valorar y necesitan valorar y apoyar los conocimientos y la ciencia de los pueblos indígenas. Eso significa reconocer las contribuciones determinadas de los territorios indígenas con sus bosques. Así que venimos con unas propuestas concretas a decir, trabajemos juntos. La decisión que tomemos hoy será la diferencia, si vamos a vivir o vamos a perecer todos. Por eso, la propuesta desde la juventud, desde la niñez, desde las mujeres, desde los ancianos, levantamos la voz y decimos, empecemos ya todos juntos. Todos juntos tenemos que subir en esta canoa desde la selva, desde la cuenca del Congo, desde Mesoamérica, que nos tiene que salvar a todos. Por eso, la acción es ahora, hermanos y hermanas. A nombre de todos los pueblos indígenas, de los bosques tropicales, decirles, aquí estamos y vamos a actuar ya. Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes.
Muchas gracias, Tuniak. I don't think that there is a louder voice right now in this very important room, calling out for the rights of Indigenous people, calling out for the fact that there is no more time, and for us to translate the incredible words that we have heard this morning and that we will continue to hear during the next 2 weeks into action. Thank you for your call to action and asking us to all get into the canoe together, wherever we may be. I would like to now pass to President Carlos Alvarado Quezada, a president of a country that has shown for much time that protecting nature is absolutely fundamental to the protection not only of your people, but of people across the globe, and also recognized by your recent Earthshot Award. President, as a country rich with forests and a large Indigenous population, why do you see protecting land rights as important?
Thank you, and I want to salute and thank my colleagues here. We need to protect those because of the voice we just heard and voices around the world that are similar. I'd like to share my personal journey in this. When I was a freshman going out of university, I started working in a place by accident called FONAFIFO, which is the National Forestry Fund of Costa Rica. Sorry, I was a journalist, just graduated, but I ended up working there, and they told me, okay, we have this new concept we need to communicate. It's called environmental services. And I asked, what is it, environmental services? They say, okay, forest provides services to communities and humanity. That was more than 20 years ago. And I was like, okay, I thought for 1 second, this is like selling air. This is bluffing. They say, no. Okay, the concept is this. Forests take care of water. They protect water, so they're good for production. That's one service. Forests are home to various species, animals, plants, so you have a protection of biodiversity. At that time, biodiversity was not as valued as today, for example, when we see this great loss of biodiversity. Forests also fix carbon in the fight against climate change, 20 years ago. And they also are good for the economy because they provide ecosystems in which people could have tourism and productive activities. So I started working on that. And as going forward in payment for environmental services, which is now recognized with the Earthshot, one of the areas that was not yet explored was the payment of environmental services for indigenous communities and local communities. Because it is true that the main guardians of forest and land are indigenous communities, because the knowledge of how to balance the ecosystems and livelihoods, it's not equal. I mean, that concept, those concepts are not present after Industrial Revolution. It's just about production. The other knowledge before that, that knowledge of our indigenous people, it's about sustainability. So that is key. And in Costa Rica, we're using that scheme, and currently payment for environmental services goes to indigenous communities that actually protect those forests. And we get those services with fixed carbon, which we know we need to do now. We protect biodiversity, and that's one of the key elements of how Costa Rica went in 1980s from 20% of forest coverage to currently having more than 50% of forest coverage. That's one of the key traits of how we managed to do that. And also, in terms of biodiversity, when the world has lost about 40% of biomass, of biodiversity, following the trend of the forest, we have recovered approximately 40% of wildlife biomass due to forest protection, and that's how we managed to do that with protection of land and hand in hand with indigenous people. So that's a bit of it, a little bit of my journey, personal journey, but also hand in hand with our country's been doing.
Thank you so much, President. And we know that storytelling is absolutely fundamental, and the importance also of paying environmental services to those that are the stewards of the land. Thank you for that personal journey. Speaking of paying, I would like to turn to the perspective of a philanthropist and to speak to you, Darren, as the president of the Ford Foundation, thinking of new funding mechanisms to channel money to Indigenous peoples and communities. Why is your foundation taking on a major commitment on this issue?
Well, thank you, and I'm so grateful to be on this panel with my esteemed colleagues. Let me say that today is historic for two reasons. It is historic because of the announcement of an unprecedented $1.7 billion raised in a fund specifically earmarked for support for Indigenous peoples and local communities, the first of its kind. Today is also historic because we have seen something unprecedented. Tanteak, you spoke here on the stage of the world leaders. Indigenous peoples have been fighting to get in the room, to get a seat at the table. And today is unprecedented because, yes, we are focused on forests and lands, but we know that without a focus on Indigenous peoples, local communities, Afro-descendants, we will not rise to the challenge. So we have work to do. We have work to ensure that as policy gets made, we center and invest in the leadership, the capacity building, the power of Indigenous leaders, that they no longer will stand outside of the room asking to be allowed in, but that we as donors recognize that without a focus and centering them, there is not going to be a solution to this climate challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darren. And so true, again, that we must have people at the table from all different Indigenous communities, different genders, and a real diversity so that we can truly solve the complexity of the problems that we have in front of us. Patrick, this donor pledge presents a big acknowledgement from donors of the need to support Indigenous and forest communities. As an Indigenous leader from the DRC region, what is your thinking? Why is this so important to you?
Chers dirigeants mondiaux et décideurs, chers collègues, sœurs et sœurs autochtones, je m'appelle Patrick Saïdi, je viens de la République démocratique du Congo, je suis coordonnateur national de la dynamique des groupes des peuples autochtones. Ici, je représente les organisations autochtones vivant dans la forêt du bassin du Congo, le deuxième plus grand massif tropical forestier au monde. Nous saluons effectivement la mobilisation des fonds internationaux pour sécuriser les droits à la terre des autochtones. Si nous voulons tous renforcer la gestion des territoires forestiers par les autochtones comme une solution efficace aux crises climatiques et de la biodiversité, cette sécurisation des droits à la terre est une condition préalable et fondamentale. Les promesses financières que vous faites et la volonté politique que vous affichez ici à Glasgow doivent maintenant se matérialiser sur le terrain. Des mécanismes efficaces doivent être mis en place pour garantir que les ressources mobilisées atteignent véritablement et prioritairement les communautés autochtones et locales. Mon pays, la RDC, s'est engagé à devenir un leader mondial du climat avec le slogan RDC Pays Solution. Le président Félix Tshisekedi s'est engagé à sécuriser les terres des autochtones et c'est suivant leur volonté et sous leur contrôle. Le Parlement s'apprête à voter une loi spécifique en faveur des peuples autochtones reconnaissant leurs droits à la terre et aux ressources. Ceci est une contribution majeure dans la lutte contre le changement climatique. D'autres pays doivent suivre cet exemple. Nous nous joignons à vous et à nos frères et sœurs des pays forestiers tropicaux pour aider nos gouvernements à entreprendre des initiatives durables qui préserveront nos forêts. Si vous aspirez à un développement durable, il faut sécuriser les droits à la terre des autochtones et leur système de gouvernance pour une protection efficace des forêts. Car sans forêt, nous ne saurons pas faire face au changement climatique et nous ne connaîtrons pas le développement. Merci.
Merci Patrick pour vos mots tellement inspirants. Et maintenant, I would like to turn to Joan. Joan, I want to give you the last word. This commitment is something that Indigenous people and local forest communities have been asking for a long time. What do you think is most critical with regard to this pledge, and how can we truly have it change things on the ground, as we've been asked also by Tantiak and many others, to ensure that this becomes not just words, but true actions?
Thank you for that. We welcome today's global commitment to strengthen the forest tenure of Indigenous peoples and local communities. Should this investment lead to appropriate policies and investments, this will certainly make profound changes on the ground. We expect this commitment to ensure forest tenure and conservation of at least 500 million hectares of forest managed by Indigenous peoples and local communities. We should also support actions to protect boreal forests. As guardians of the forest, we look forward to a new partnership based on respect, solidarity, and cooperation expressed in concrete policy actions and investments that will protect our rights and enhance our reciprocal and interdependent relationship with nature, and will thereby propel the conservation of forests and ecosystems, not only for us, but for all humanity. We need to ensure that this commitment is fully aligned to broader policies and actions to combat climate change. We call for policy coherence and strong implementation of states and other actors to deliver on their commitments and obligations to reduce carbon emissions, reduce and halt deforestation, while fully respecting the rights of Indigenous peoples and local communities. These actions are imperative to save the planet now. Indigenous peoples' conservation of forests is very evident. Yet each day, we are losing our forests and we are being persecuted due to powerful vested interest and the lack of political will. We urgently need you, the world leaders today, to act now to stop this devastation and criminalization. Finally, we urge you to build with us today the transformational partnerships that begin with the respect for our rights. With nature reaching a tipping point, your collective actions now to save the world's forest and biodiversity will determine our future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. Thank you also for the reminder of solidarity and mutual respect for Indigenous rights and the importance, again, that we must listen and protect Indigenous people. I know as well, and our thoughts go to many of the most vulnerable Indigenous people who have lost their lives during the COVID pandemic. I would like to thank the panel for the depth of your storytelling and your commitments and your call to action. And may I ask you now to get up and move towards the left and exit. Thank you very much. As always, we can get inspired by the sounds of nature. Ladies and gentlemen, it's truly a pleasure to introduce the next panel. Here we are going to speak about sustainable consumption and production, and as some of you know, as co-president of the Club of Rome, consumption is absolutely essential for all of us who have been speaking about the need to shift our consumption and production patterns. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you three very prominent leaders within this field. The President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the World Trade Organization, and Børge Brende from the World Economic Forum as CEO will be obviously giving us the importance of what the private sector can do in terms of shifting our economies. So thank you. And Ngozi, you will be facilitating this session.
Yes.
So you are wanting to come to the lectern, please do.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for that. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me make three key points before I hand over to the panel. The first point I'd like to make about trade and forest and land use is that trade can and must make a positive contribution to halting deforestation and supporting more sustainable markets for forest and farm goods as part of a comprehensive and ambitious climate action agenda. Forests are critical for biodiversity conservation, carbon sequestration, and the maintenance of ecosystems. But the proportion of forest area fell dramatically between 2000 to 2020, resulting in a net loss of 100 million hectares of the world's forests. Policies affecting trade and markets must advance multiple goals, including safeguarding biodiversity, supporting climate action, promoting food security, creating jobs and raising incomes, and supporting viable, dynamic, and competitive markets. Passing and implementing robust environmental legislation can ensure that forest products and agricultural goods reflect their true costs when these products are traded on domestic or international markets. This can enable trade to play a positive role in contributing to mitigation and adaptation efforts as part of a comprehensive and ambitious climate action agenda. My second point is that governments can help tackle deforestation by reforming subsidies that create perverse incentives on global markets. Governments can help support more sustainable, equitable, and efficient global markets by reforming subsidies that create perverse incentives for market actors, including in areas such as fossil fuels, agriculture, and fisheries. Doing so would improve the allocation of scarce global resources, as well as contributing to the competitiveness, sustainability, and resilience of communities in both rural and urban areas. My third point is that trade has an essential role to play in the just and inclusive food system transformation that we need. As rising incomes, demographic change, and evolving diets continue to shape markets for food and agriculture, trade has an important role to play in enabling food producers to respond to rising demand without exacerbating pressure on forests, other carbon sinks, and other biodiversity-rich ecosystems. Digital trade and services can also contribute directly to improving sustainable forest management and land use by expanding access to technologies that can support conservation and monitoring efforts. It is important in this process of promoting sustainable and deforestation-free value chains to adopt a positive and collaborative approach through non-discriminatory, comprehensive, and ambitious policies that help ensure a just and inclusive transition. As the UK and Indonesian governments pointed out, this could lead to markets worth up to $5 trillion a year in trade by 2030 for the millions of people who already rely on agriculture and forestry for their livelihoods. But it's not only governments that have to act. The private sector, including the world commodity traders, must play a role. I therefore welcome the FACT Dialogue Roadmap announced today by the UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Indonesia as an opportunity to deepen understanding and to build trust, partnership and collaboration around action. So now, without further ado, let me turn to our first speaker, His Excellency President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana, a dynamic, progressive leader who is determined to show that cocoa can be produced sustainably. Your Excellency, please.
Our excellent moderator, Excellencies, I thank the British Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Boris Johnson, for the invitation to be part of this event, which is raising awareness about the importance of preserving our forests and winning the fight against climate change. In Ghana today, deforestation and forest degradation are the greatest challenges to sustainable forest management. The consequential effect of deforestation and forest degradation has proved to be severe climate change, which has dire consequences for our livelihoods, specifically the drying up of our water bodies, the pollution of our waters, loss of our prime timber species, loss of biodiversity, and change in rainfall patterns and weather conditions in the country. We realize that there is an urgent need to reverse the trend and restore our forest resources as much as possible back to their original state. We do not have tomorrow or the day after tomorrow to do this, and that is why we're acting now. Ghana has, in the course of the last 2 decades, adopted several policies and programs aimed at restoring our forest. Between 2002 and 2020, under the National Forest Plantation Development Program and the Ghana Forest Plantation Strategy, some 580,000 hectares of plantations have been established. Again, through the Youth in Afforestation Program, we're committed to reclaiming some 7.6 million hectares of degraded forest and farmlands. In June this year, I led the entire country through the Green Ghana project to plant over 7 million trees, far above the 5 million we had targeted. Next year, we aim to plant a minimum of 20 million trees, and we have already begun earnest preparations towards this. We're doing all of this because we want to deepen in Ghana the culture of planting trees and thereby reduce deforestation and greenhouse gas emissions from land use changes and secure a sustainable future for present and successive generations of Ghanaians, premised on a healthy environment. Ghana is committed to the Forest Agriculture Commodity Trade FACT dialogue process, and she affirms her resolve to support the development and implementation of the FACT roadmap actions. We're determined to operationalize the timber legality assurance system as part of the forest law enforcement, governance and trade process, which will enable us to track wood electronically to ensure that only legally compliant timber is allowed into any market. From 2024 and beyond, we aim to reduce emissions by some 10 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in the cocoa forest landscape through the implementation of the Ghana Cocoa Forest Red Plus program, one of 5 ecological landscape tailored programs in Ghana's Red Plus strategy. Ghana, through her nationally determined contributions in the forest sector, is committed to supporting the global target of halving emissions by 2030 and attaining neutrality by 2050. Undoubtedly, and with the right partnerships, these goals are well within our reach and will help fight for the protection of our planet from climate change. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. And Ngozi, I apologize for interrupting, but we have a very special guest here with us who's been able to make it. And that is the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. She has asked if she could speak, and then we will turn to you, my friend. So I apologize, but due to timing issues, I would like to bring in the President, if I may. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear Dr. Ngozi, dear President Nana Akufo-Addo, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for stressing the importance of working with producer countries like, for example, Ghana. Indeed, protecting forests, sustainably managing them, and caring for the land is our shared priority. Not only because these ecosystems are essential for the stability of our climate, but also because they continue to provide livelihoods for hundreds of millions of people right around the world. And we know that in many forest communities around the world, tradition, culture, craftsmanship are very alive, and therefore protecting forests is also about protecting our heritage. And we need to better listen to the indigenous communities, to the producers, to the consumers, and to the traders. Listen to each other, work with each other. And in this principle, we have since long been working in partnership with producing countries to reduce pressure on forests. We redirect finances in support of more sustainable land use now. And we have made forest protection an integral part of our relations with trading partners. And let me give you some examples. We have the Green Alliance with Japan. We have an environment and climate dialogue with China. But we also know how important it is to play our part at home. We have to reduce the EU's consumption footprint on land and forest around the world. European voters and consumers are making this increasingly clear to us. They no longer want to buy products that are responsible for deforestation or forest degradation. And this is why we will soon propose a regulation to tackle EU-driven global deforestation. Commodities and products placed on our market should not lead to deforestation. But we will do that with a principle to working in close partnership with the producing countries. This is so important. As I've said, listen to each other, work with each other to stop deforestation. Working in partnership is essential. And it is in that context that I am pleased to announce that the Commission will provide €1 billion to the Global Forest Pledge. And we are very happy that 250 million of these will be specifically for the Congo Basin Pledge, so important too. And of course, I'm very pleased to sign up to the declaration for the EU, along with the joint statement on a roadmap for action on forest, agriculture and commodity trade. Europe is delighted to be part of this ambitious movement to protect our climate, to protect our heritage and to protect our forests. Thank you for your attention. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. We're really glad you came on for those inspiring examples and for the pledge. But I also want to thank His Excellency President Akufo-Addo for the ambitious goals he's also set of planting 20 million trees and saving 10 million tons of CO2 in the cocoa areas. So thank you both, very wonderful pledges for us to hear. Now, let me also bring in the private sector. I'd like to call on President Bjorge Brende, the President of the World Economic Forum, to give us a private sector perspective. And I understand you also have a very important announcement to make. Bjorge.
So thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you to the European Commission for the pledge of 1 billion, very consequential. Thank you, Dr. Ngozi. We'll have a very interesting dialogue now, the two of us. As you heard, the World Economic Forum, on behalf of the forum, I'm representing 10 major agricultural processing and trading businesses who have committed to accelerate climate action in their supply chains today, really walking the talk. Firstly, I would like also to thank COP and also Prime Minister Johnson for his commitment at the opening of this part of the summit, sending important signals also that the private sector needs to do its part of the job. And listening to the esteemed colleagues here from Ghana, EU and WTO, I'm struck by the sheer force of collective action, and particularly how we need more public-private partnerships on the scale we're hearing about today. This is essential if we are to keep the 1.5 degrees alive and protect and restore our forests and enhance livelihoods for those who live and work in these landscapes. Eliminating deforestation from global agriculture supply chains is critical to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. The companies who have combined an annual revenue of $500 billion have committed to create a shared roadmap for supply chain action that is consistent with the 1.5 degree pathway. The joint statement of action is a powerful example on how the private sector can be agents of transformation alongside governments, the finance sector, civil society and communities. I would like to thank all the companies and their CEOs. They are ADM, Amaji, Bunge, Cargill, Golden Agri Resources, JBS, Louis Dreyfus Company, Ulam, Viterra and Wilmar. Collectively, they handle more than half of global trade in the key commodities such as soy and palm oil. So this really makes a real difference when they do commit to also no deforestation in the future. The companies have committed to explore how they can jointly accelerate implementation of existing commitments to zero deforestation, how they can increase transparency on their Scope 3 emissions, how they can improve the livelihoods of farmers, and how they can highlight to governments the enabling policy environments needed to accelerate this type of action. The World Economic Forum is here to support this public-private collaboration. It is what we do the best and how we have confidence that we can work together to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. In our last report, the Tropical Forest Alliance outlined how demand for agricultural commodities has risen an astonishing 50% in the last 20 years. And with 1.8 billion people projected to enter the middle class before 2030, this is only set to grow. That is a stark reminder of the reality we face and why this type of action from our leading agricultural commodity trading companies is so vital if we are to reach our climate goals while also delivering on food security. We have no time to lose. Let's not move around deck chairs on Titanic. Let's roll up our sleeves and deliver on this promise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bjørge, for that ambitious announcement. It's really heartening to hear that the 10 major agricultural commodities traders responsible for half of all trade in agricultural commodities have made these pledges. Thank you so much for sharing. And thank you to you and the WEF for helping back and make this happen. Let me use this opportunity to thank all our speakers wholeheartedly for their interventions. Your remarks have shown that governments and private actors are taking concrete steps to ensure that trade makes a positive contribution to sustainable outcomes on forests and land use. We all now need to redouble our efforts to ensure that trade makes real changes in people's lives, both now and for generations to come. Thank you very much. And now let me hand over to our wonderful MC.
Thank you so much, Ngozi. Thank you both for staying with us. Thank you to the President of the European Commission and the President of Ghana. It has been such a pleasure having this as our closing session, because we do know that, as you have so clearly indicated, Ngozi, that we have to think about trade as one of the systemic shifts that address the way in which we protect our forests. So thank you both.
Thank you.
And may I lead you off to the left. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and if there are any excellencies still in the room, all of you who are still watching, I feel as if I've run a marathon myself this morning. There have been so many incredible announcements. Such an important way to start our COP26 commitments. We've been asked time and time again by the next generation, by the youth that are not in this room, that we must turn our words into action. That is what we were told as well time and time again today, not only by Indigenous peoples and community leaders, but by the leaders of so many countries. This has been an extraordinary event, with a huge thanks to our host country, to the distinguished guests, and to the unprecedented alliance of governments, companies, financial actors, and non-state leaders, all of whom have come forward with commitments. This is about mutual respect and solidarity. We have shifted the bar. How have we done that this morning? Please take note. 100 countries have committed to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030. This is the decisive decade. Through the Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forests and Land Use, this is such a powerful demonstration of political will and collaboration from countries accounting for over 80% of the world's forests. Again, this has never been done before. But follow through, as we've all been saying today, is absolutely critical. This cannot be mere words. It cannot be a moment in time. We have seen substantial commitments to action today, and we must translate those 12 billion public climate finance to forests and the 7.2 billion private finance that now has been mobilized into capital that truly flows to protect the Congo Basin, to protect the Amazon, to protect our lungs across the globe. We have also seen commitments to begin the systemic shifts required to truly put the world on a path to deliver this 2030 goal. Multilateral development banks have committed to entrench nature in their policy and their operations. Promising public-private partnership has been announced through the LEAF Coalition. CEOs from more than 30 financial institutions with portfolios worth over 8.7 trillion of global assets say they will eliminate investment in activities linked to deforestation. And we've seen a unique offering from major traders to support supply chain action consistent with a 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. This sets out a clear roadmap to COP27, and it enables us to move forward. The launch of the FACT roadmap to deliver sustainable trade and reduce pressure on forests, which we've just heard about, including support for smallholder farmers and improving the transparency of supply chains, endorsed by 28 governments representing 76% of global trade in key commodities that can threaten forests. Yes, delivery is everything. We need urgent results and further commitments and action to underpin these fine words. Our next steps will be truly defining. That is how I leave you today. As was so promptly indicated, may we all get in the same canoe, using synergetic paddles to get us there. As we move on this pathway, this stream, which will become, we hope, many streams, to really shift deforestation, to stop deforestation, and to focus also our minds on regeneration. Thank you again to all of the incredible, esteemed leaders from the private and the public sector that have made truly a difference today. And thank you for staying here with me today as well. Stay safe.